Hi everyone, welcome to our week 4 lecture and discussion on market research. So market research makes up a couple of different elements. There's support systems that are put in place to help drive and collect information and allow managers to make decisions. Database marketing is a fairly common element of that. It's typically very large computerized files and systems that allow people to look at really specific consumer patterns and behavior. And then marketing research is the process of where you plan, collect, and analyze the data that helps you figure out what important marketing decisions need to be made for a business. So part of it is describing what you're trying to do, right? And actually it's probably the most important element is figuring out what information you're trying to gain. Then you've got to look at explaining that information and then helping that information, more importantly, figure out, what if we do this? What does this data tell us and help us understand how we move forward? So it's most important to determine why you do it. Strategy development, typically we're developing where your business is going to go and helping information there. And the part of it in risk assessment is figuring out, well, if we get into this market and do these things, this information helps hopefully lower our risk, or at least you go in there with your eyes open. A lot of this information can help determine features that get put in, or more importantly, get left out in your product definition exercise and activity. And then segmentation is figuring out, well, maybe we go after these people in this market, and this data helps us figure out which part of this large market it makes sense for us to go after. And then you got to determine, because this stuff isn't free, you've got to hire people or organizations to be able to collect the information, or pay for people who've done that for you. There are plenty of companies whose whole reason for existence is just for collecting and managing market information. As to determine the benefit you get out of that justifies the cost. So you got to look at an ROI scenario there as well. That's important. So how does management use the research? Well, it helps you improve your quality of decision making because you have more information available to you before you decide to either launch a product or maybe even cancel one. It helps you look at where there's issues going on. Also helps you make sure that it costs so much money to acquire a customer, so keeping existing customers is important, and getting data that supports that and keeps that moving is essential to any business. Helps you understand what's going on with the market, with your customers, with your competitors as well, and then maybe helps flag some things that are changing, trends, right? You look at trending, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second and how that's important. And then you help determine what things are sort of worth and how much customer satisfaction you have, and whether or not you need to put more money or time and effort into that as well. So the research process involves a few core steps that everyone has. One is defining a problem. Then you got to put a plan in place to help design and get the information that you're looking for. You establish a procedure on how you're going to do that, collect the data, analyze it, and generate a report or findings that come from that. And then based on that, there's follow-up, right? You learn something new and then you take a different tact, or what you're doing is working, so you stay the course. One example of what research did for something is, you think about Valentine's Day. It really is essentially, which we just went through this past week on Thursday, it's really a marketing creation. It was a manufactured holiday, if you will, that is huge. It's a multi-billion-dollar holiday. And if you look at this data that looks over a period of about 10 years, what the average Valentine's Day spend has been per person, that's a pretty big number. I mean, you're averaging well over $100 in spending for Valentine's Day. And I can tell you, I took out my significant other and made sure that she had a proper lunch and bought the appropriate things that one buys for Valentine's, and she did the same, and we probably easily approached that number without a doubt. So it's something, essentially, it's a manufactured holiday that's become fairly big business, and especially chocolate companies and companies like that have tied their business to the fortunes of that particular day. It's a pretty big element, right? If you look at the chocolate business, right? There's holidays, Easter, Valentine is certainly way up there in terms of a big day and a big sort of market driver for these particular businesses. So research can get you some interesting information for sure. If you look at a research project, again, you've got to determine what the problem is, set objectives, and then how you're going to use that information to make decisions. So it's a really important part of structuring any kind of research. There's primary data and secondary data. Secondary data and sources for that come from either internal company information. You can get them from agencies. I mean, a lot of government agencies are about producing demographic data. The U.S. Census is a great example of that. You have trade and industry associations that help generate, one of the benefits of being a member of those organizations is that they have that kind of information. There's, business periodicals, news media, all these places are in the business of generating data that we can use and leverage and doesn't cost you minimal amounts of money. The advantages are they save you time and money. It helps you determine a direction for your primary data collection, which we'll talk about in a minute. It helps sort of narrow down the field of view, if you will. But the other is that it may not really give you what you're looking for, depending on the kind of product or service you have. It may not be on target with the research problem you have, and then you've got to wonder about the quality and accuracy of the data. So these things are all issues, and in some cases you can buy this data and it does cost you money. Primary data, on the other hand, has many more advantages than disadvantages. You can get a very specific question answered. The data is current because you're getting it real time, and you know where you're getting it because you're essentially moving forward with the data analysis and the data collection. And because you are doing it, you own it. The problem is it's very expensive to do this kind of work, focus groups, handing out surveys, putting together different kinds of activities to collect information from consumers and our customers, customer satisfaction surveys. This stuff can be extremely costly. So that's really the biggest downside of primary data. So if you look at how you can research, you can do in-home interviews. You see actually people on the street, if you will, or mall intercept interviews. Telephone interviews are still very common. Mail surveys were more common, still there, but not as much. More internet-based surveys, much more common. Interviews with executives or key decision makers, and then focus groups as well. Designing your questions is very important. Here's an example of open-ended, closed-ended, or scaled response, and those questions can make a big difference in the kind of information you get from your primary research efforts. So you make sure that when you design a questionnaire, it's clear and concise. Nothing's ambiguous. You try to not give people leading questions because you want sort of unbiased, not sort of absolutely unbiased and open kind of, you want people to really tell you what's going on. And then you try to make sure that you don't build multiple questions into one. The internet has, as it has with many things, provided some great opportunities for cost efficiencies and scale in terms of accessing people on a very efficient platform. So it's really seen by many as the greatest potential for future growth in terms of market research. It can be a little unwielding in terms of managing it, but it does and has shown the most promise for sure. So this is a screenshot of SurveyMonkey. I asked in one of the four to have each group provide an architect and basically put together a survey. And I think it will be a great sort of mechanism if you haven't used it before. It's free. You sign up for it. And it's a great way to get information. So here are some of the surveys that I have. I did one on the Super Bowl with one of my classes. And it'll just take a minute to launch there. So it's free to sign up for the standard issue. You don't get lots of detailed analysis tools. I'll show you once this loads up what those are like. But it's a great way to get information and get some quick response. And there's a number of survey-based things like Qualtrics and others. So here's the survey results, and we can actually analyze those and take a quick look at them. And it provides information. I think I only put together, I think this is like 4 questions about your favorite, least favorite, most creative ad, that type of thing. And it's a great way to sort of get used to what survey construction is like and what works and what doesn't, and gives you simple analytics here once it gets around to doing it. So that's one thing I want you guys to look at, and we'll actually come back to this after it loads because it's being a bit problematic and slow. So I do want you to get some experience there if you haven't done that. Scanner-based research, you'd think about barcodes. There's a tremendous rich amount of data that companies, like let's say a Stop and Shop or Shaw's, they aggregate this data and then they turn around and use it for their own purposes and then sell it to other groups that collect it from many other like companies. They aggregate it, cleanse it, massage it, and then they also end up selling it back to these companies that they get it from as well. So it's a very effective, interesting way to get information for sure. Let's go back and see if we've gotten our survey loaded in terms of the results. Yeah, here we go. So this was a question about what your favorite ad was, and there's a whole list of them. You can see what they were, and it actually gives on a bar chart, and then it gives you percentages for each ad, then which one was the most creative, and there were answers there. There were up to, 50 ads that were run during the Super Bowl, believe it or not. I think there were even a few more in that, but these were the most notable ones, if you will. So that's an example of a survey, and I'm asking each group to put one together, which I think you'll find interesting. We talked about trends before. If you're trying to do some research, just check out, you go to google.com and then /trends, and then you get a really interesting service. It doesn't give you super amounts of information. For instance, I put in Lance Armstrong here, and this gives me an idea of what engagement there has been in that particular term on Google. And it also gives you the areas of the world where there's the most interest, which is kind of interesting as well. You look here, obviously United States is a big one. Search volume is big. Canada a little less. Interestingly enough, South Africa is pretty high. Australia is pretty high. And let's look at the UK. Ireland, pretty big one. UK is pretty large. France, which is I would have thought would have been a bit larger, is not as much. So that gives you an idea in the world. And apparently, Nepal has a little bit. India has got some notable one. Lots of alignment with Lance Armstrong with English-speaking countries, interestingly enough. So let's just put something here. Let's say one of the brands that you're interested in. Let me go back here. Let's say it's Chipotle. So you're thinking about doing something with that one, and then you click Add Term, and what it'll do is it'll show you, what's trending, and it'll show you information search, at least on Google, on that particular term. And what you'll find is, you look like it looks like it's trending down, right? In general, not as much interest as used to be when the company first came out. Lots of unique interest, highly biased in the U.S. clearly, since it's a U.S. chain. And then when you see these letters here, they actually are tied to articles, right? That help drive interest potentially. So let's put another one here just for giggles. Let's say we're looking at a brand. Let's put Dunkin' Donuts in, and we hit Add Term. And it thinks like it's going out there. And what you'll find is you'll see where that's saying. So if you've got a trend line that's either flat, if it's up, right, that means this company is up on the rise. You look at Dunkin' Donuts locations, coffee. This gives you a rating based on all of those, and you just look at it, and it seems to be climbing, which would give you and tell you that they're sort of going in the right direction, at least in terms of interest from people. I don't know why Pakistan has some interest there. There's something for some reason there. That's kind of an odd one. Philippines is up there too. Looks like I see Argentina, Chile up there as well. That's kind of interesting. And then if you look at Canada, it's there. But obviously in the U.S., since it's a U.S.-based company, very high. So it might be an interesting tool that you can use to do some sort of basic research on what's going on. Let's put a company in here. All right. Just kind of look at that real quick once this thing loads again. That maybe has had some issues on the negative side. So I'm going to put in Solyndra. Of course, I don't know if I'm spelling this right. Okay. Solyndra, I think, is the spelling. It'll tell us if it is or not. And they've obviously a solar-based company, a solar energy-based company that went out of business, very much in the news on a negative perspective associated with issues. So here they are, right? Let's see what's here up at D really quick, assuming I can get to it. And it's obviously you basically, okay, White House worried about Solyndra default. So obviously they got into the news for a lot of bad reasons, and it's been trending down since then. So it's an interesting tool that you can use for research, for sure. A couple of other quick things. We do have new fora that have been placed on the discussion board. Make sure you do that. And one other comment, our fan page project, which I put a little video together on, I want to make sure that you guys start working on that right away. Groups have gotten together. I asked for you guys to elect a CEO, if you will, somebody that will be responsible, a point person that I can talk to and engage with on how you're doing. But you need to start working together as a group. You need to pick a team name, and you also need to make sure that you are starting and figuring out what your brand is going to be for your fan page. So make sure you look at this presentation and the short video clip that I put on and get that taken care of. So have a good weekend and get cracking on the new fora that are on the discussion board. Speak with you soon.